Welcome to Commander Central. Today, we'll be taking a look at listener Brian McManus's Reyav Master Smith deck. I'm Dana.
And I'm Chris.
Hey, Chris, how's it going, man?
It is going wonderful. You know, it's a wonderful rainy morning today in old Wisconsin, so...
Max is enjoying the sunshine in Florida right now, which is why he is not with us.
Yeah, lucky.
He texted me yesterday that he got his first sunburn of the year sitting by the pool. So, yeah.
Well, you know what? I don't care. That's what he gets for having nice weather.
I could not feel super sympathetic for him. Yeah, I was not feeling bad. So, it is just you and I holding down the fort, and we're going to be doing a deck tech today.
Sure are.
How's your week been going so far? Anything exciting going on?
This weekend, I go to, I think it's Minneapolis is where we're going. We have, I think it's Nerd Rage Gaming's team event, Team Trios or whatever.
Oh, okay.
I'm playing Modern, and then Sunday, if we don't make top 8, I'll probably be playing in the Modern 5K up there as well.
Oh, nice. That'll be a fun weekend.
Yeah, it should be.
I think it's supposed to be kind of rainy anyway, so you're not going to miss much exciting outdoor time around here. So
Right, yeah, I'd love to be out fishing, but fishing's been really crappy lately, so...
Well, I got to play at the shop last night, played, 5-ish games or so. And they were all good. They were all weirdly fast. It was just a situation where, even, people that I play with, I know how quick their decks go. Everyone just stumbled, it seemed like every game someone just stumbled into something. One person, our friend Justin, he's got a Marchesa deck. I've played it a gazillion times. It's not a super tuned Marchesa deck, intentionally moves relatively slowly. And, he kicked off. Turn 2, dropped a Signet. Turn 3, top decked a Soul Ring and another Mana Rock. And turn 4, he plays Hornet Queen and or stole my Hornet Queen from my deck and played something else too. And then it just snowballed from there. So by turn 5, he's got 30 power on the field, and they all have counters for Marchesa. And every game went like that, where decks that just don't traditionally go super fast hit whatever combination of perfect things they need to hit to make everything just fly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how most of my games went last night, which is a fine change of pace. It wasn't a big deal. But yeah, I even had one where I played my Jury deck and opened with a turn 1 Soul Ring. So turn 2, I was able to drop a Professional Facebreaker, which has Menace and makes a treasure when you hit an opponent. And turn 3, then I was able to drop a Grim Hireling, which when one of your creatures deals combat damage to a person, you make 2 treasures.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to, on turn 3, make 3 treasures with the Professional Facebreaker, and then on turn 4, I made 6, because I hit 2 different people, one with the Grim Hireling and one with the Facebreaker. So I was making 6 treasures a turn, just of those 2 cards with Jury, and, I think turn 6, I shot Resignation and hit everyone for, 28, because I was able to get Jury so big.
Jeez.
I mean, just every game went that way, where just people had the perfect combination of stuff in decks that aren't really designed to go crazy fast. So
bunch of cheaters is what I'm hearing.
I mean, it felt that way, absolutely, yeah. Ridiculous stuff. So yeah, that was for my game society. It was good to get out and play. I got to see a few new cards that I haven't got a chance to play yet, like Professional Facebreaker, so that's always fun too.
Yes.
Yeah, good times. We're also right in the middle of previews for the Baldur's Gate Commander set, and a couple things that we had talked about are already popping up, so I'm excited to be able to maybe delve into these cards a little bit more. I'm sure we'll do probably our favorite cards from the set once it comes out, but
yeah, this is one of the few sets.
All done, so.
Yeah, this is one of the few sets that I'm actually, gonna pay attention to a little bit more than the other standard sets that have been coming out.
I mean, the added flavor stuff for someone who plays D&D is really nice, too.
Yeah, I hope it's good. I mean, I hope it's not quite as, fan servicey as what the Forgotten Realms set was. I hope it's more, to the point. Because, they did a whole lot of fan service with, the Driss Duardin storyline and all that,
Sure.
And it was I just want, actual, the from D&D lore type of things. I saw... what the heck's her name? The witch queen or whatever. Yeah, she was printed. And I'm okay, this is more what I was waiting
for. And
it's
a super cool card, too.
Yeah.
Same thing with the Elminster card. I like the Elminster card a lot, too. They're both a lot of fun. So yeah, I've liked what I've seen so far, definitely.
Yes.
All right, let's jump into this deck tech. This is from listener Brian McManus, and it's our Reyav Master Smith deck. So we have a few questions we're going to ask.
I have to prerequisite this and say,
yes,
Brian, there are a few things in here that you sent us that we are family appropriate, and I don't know how we're going to word this.
we will have to do a little bit of editing as we go. Absolutely. So the first question we ask is, what is your meta like? My meta is 100% the Commander Central / via spell table. I mostly play with the Bitter Ordeal crew in weekly games with Steve, Matt, and John. They're the absolute worst. Every deck John makes is a graveyard deck, even if it's mono blue. Steve always tries to kill me first, regardless of what deck I'm playing, and Matt sandbags the whole effing game and then wins at the end, usually. F those guys. So we're getting some strong CCO podcast vibes here in our language we're using.
So the next question that we ask, is like, what is the goal of the deck? We're told, I love equipment. This deck is a revamp of what was previously an Arden / Rogoraka deck. I'm assuming Rogorok is the 0-drop dude, right? Yeah, the mono red one. I was super into Reyav as soon as he came out, though as well because Double Strike is the best thing since sliced bread for beating faces. Oh boy, yeah. Double Strike is really good. I decided to really focus on the Double Strike aspect by using equipment with combat damage triggers to double those up because Value Town, baby. That kind of naturally led to swords of X and Y, every single sword that's been printed, because we got all those new ones too just recently as well. Since they all have combat damage triggers, and then that led to just focusing on swords in general for extra value and face beating. The deck can play a bit Voltron-y, which, is kind of expected, I guess, when you're thinking about that kind of thing, but it's not the main goal of the deck. The deck wants to suit up whoever's in play and swing at multiple players, ideally. I don't like the feel-bads that my Voltron deck can generate when they KO someone super early, like Brynner Battlehammer, because you can suit up, like you get a free equip off of them once a turn or something. So the deck actively wants to spread the damage around instead. Ideally, Reyav or one of his backups like Halvar is in play to give Double Strike. If not, there's always extra combats. Well, that's and you don't want to feel bad. I see where we're going with this. But this deck is Boros, so you can only go so far with it.
Right. What are the areas of weakness or what we should focus on? Well, the deck can be a bit scary, he says. It tends to warrant the hate it gets because Boros can bring the ouchie, which is definitely true sometimes. I'd like to see maybe a bit more John hate, aka graveyard hate. I'd also be keen on any side grades you guys have that might make the deck less threatening while also being effective.
I'm not really sure about that. I mean, when you look at, when you see this commander in general, I think it's just going to draw threat immediately because of the abilities.
I tend to agree. That part will be tricky.
Yep. So for budget limit, we got a sad face that says, what's a budget? So I'm going to try and keep this, within a friendly budget. I'm not going to, suggest like $200 cards, because you could definitely jam a Wheel of Fortune and stuff in here and that would make the deck better, but I'm not going to suggest stuff like that.
Yeah, we'll keep it kind of reasonable, I guess. For what most people can actually have access to or afford to get. It's also, to be honest, it's a pretty tuned deck. There's not a lot of like really obvious logical changes to make here too. It's clearly something he's enjoyed playing and tinkered with quite a bit. So
agreed.
This is going to be one of those ones where we maybe do a little more show and tell than we do deck tech kind of stuff. So first we'll actually read Reyav Master Smith. 2 mana, so really aggressive for a Dwarf Artificer. Reyav is a 2/2 as well. Whenever a creature you control that's enchanted or equipped attacks, that creature gains Double Strike until end of turn. So just anything that has an aura on it or anything that's equipped gets Double Strike automatically.
Yep.
We'll do the boring thing first, which is the land base. Chris, you want to go over that real quick?
Sure. We got 35 lands, which kind of caught me off guard. It seemed a little light. But then again, this is Boros, and a lot of the times, you're low to the ground and you have cheating stuff. So 35 lands.
The average CMC is below 3, so like that doesn't seem necessarily unreasonable. The commander's easy to cast. I'm not sure I'd run 35, but like it's not unreasonable.
No. So we have Ancient Den, Ancient Tomb, Arid Mesa, Axeguard Armory, which for those of you that don't know, Axeguard Armory is the one out of Keldheim that you sacrifice for Boros, like a couple of like pips and that stuff, to search your library for an aura card and or an equipment card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. Pretty good land, honestly. Mm-hmm. We have Buried Ruin, Command Tower, Flamekin Village, Great Furnace, Hanwar Battlements, Inventor's Fair. There is 3 mountains, I do believe. My color on my screen's all wonky. Myriad Landscape, Needle Verge Pathway, 7 plains, 1
Looks to be.
plateau, Prismatic Vista, Rogue's Passage, Rugged Prairie, Rust Vale Bridge, Sacred Foundry, Scavenger Grounds, Slayer Stronghold, Spectator Seeding, a Strip Mine, Sun Home, Fortress of the Legion, Urza Saga, and a War Room.
Okay, I mean that's a pretty good land base. There's good utility stuff that either like Adventurers Fair or Axeguard Armory tutors you up things. You know, Buried Ruin recurs an artifact back to the top of your library if you need one. You've got things that, you know, grant double strike in case your commander isn't out, like Sunhome. Slayer's Stronghold gives a thing +2/+0 and haste. There's a few other haste enablers. That's what Henweir Battlements does and Flamekindred Village does. So there's logical utility lands that all interact pretty well with a deck that's going to be swinging at people and trying to punch face.
I'm just very caught off guard. You know, it's a very beautiful land base. There's, you know, a dual land, there's fetches, there's, you know, all the cards that you need, but there's no Red-White Horizon land, the Sunbait Canyon. Yeah. I was like, that caught me off guard, like, immediately. I looked at this, I'm like, really, of all the lands, you're missing that one? Come on, man.
Yeah, particularly in a Boros deck where draw gets kind of lean.
Yeah, I mean, I understand War Room and all that, but, I mean, you could even run, what's that new one that's like War Room out of Kamigawa that you sacrifice to draw a card if you control a artifact, or draw 2 if you control artifact and enchantment or something.
A Roadside Reliquary.
Yes. I mean, like, that's another one that could be played in here, too, because you're only in 2 colors, so any type of little, you know, backup plan to card draw is really nice.
Yeah, I would, the one I don't love Mirrored Landscape these days necessarily in decks. Particularly a deck like this where you're kind of trying to hit face and you're not leaving mana up very often because you don't have a ton of instant speed stuff. I would definitely replace Mirrored Landscape with that Horizon land just for the late game draw for sure. That's one of the small changes I would probably make. Yep.
I do like Mirrored Landscape lately in my decks because I've been trying to detune them, and I feel like this is a good way to slow it down a little bit. You know, it's a land that comes into play tapped. The lands come into play tapped if you sacrifice it, so I mean you're slowing down a couple turns. So if that's what you're looking for, then run that. Same with like I try to run like Evolving Wilds and stuff like that over the actual true fetches to slow down the decks as well.
Sure.
So
a couple small things you could do if you wanted to. Talking about Graveyard Hate, I guess one weight in your land base without really giving up too many slots you could do is you could add a couple of the deserts that produce colored mana that were in Amonkhet, just because that means you cannot sacrifice Scavenger Grounds to itself. You can sacrifice one of those deserts to hit a graveyard and still have Scavenger Grounds around.
Yeah, Ramnap Ruins, I think, is the red one. Yep.
So there's a couple that you could run in this deck that would allow you to do that. They do come into play tapped or deal damage to you, but like that is an option if you really want extra Graveyard Hate without having to sacrifice slots for it. That's something you could do. War Room is a card I love in 2 color decks and under, but I've also been having really good luck with Bonder's Enclave, which also taps to draw you a card for 3, but it requires you to have a creature with power 4 or greater. But in this deck, any creature basically wearing a sword is going to be power 4 or greater.
Yeah, unless it's Stoneforge Mystic. I think it's like that. There's like 2 of them in the deck that I think. Yeah.
So like for the most part, that's just always going to be active in this deck. It's just going to be a War Room for the most part. So I've really been liking it after I started running War Room and having good luck with it. Then I started putting Bonder's Enclave in a few decks that always consistently had a creature, and it's been really good for me too. So I thought I would at least mention that since War Room's already in the deck. The last kind of big thing is just something I'm throwing out there to consider. There's already 3 artifact lands in this deck, which makes sense because they're tutorable. They fuel stuff that cares about artifacts. There's also Treasure Vault, which is just generally a good land, and Darksteel Citadel, which just doesn't have many downsides to run because it's indestructible and comes into play untapped. Power Depot's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, but it's an artifact land, and it does buff a creature with a counter, so it's not worthless. If you were to add those other 3, then at that point you're at 6 artifact lands. You also have a Mana Crypt and a Mox Opal, which we'll go into artifacts next to talk about. So at that point you're at 7 cards that if you imprint them onto a Prototype Portal, you can tap Prototype Portal for 0 and like just make an artifact land as a ramp spell, or make another Mox Opal, or make another Mana Crypt. Imprint a Soul Ring for 1 and you're making another Soul Ring. Imprint a Masterwork of Ingenuity for 1, Dowsing Dagger for 2, whatever. There's a ton of stuff in this deck that would work well with Prototype Portal, which is more of an artifact thing we'll talk about in a bit. But I'm just saying, since you have 3 artifact lands, you could very easily go up to 6 and really consistently have the ability to imprint one onto a Prototype Portal, and every turn just tap that for 0 mana and make a new artifact land.
Yeah, I've seen you do that before too, so It is
Yeah,
not
I
fun
only
to
do
play
it-
against.
I only do it in one deck. I've got it in my Vela deck because there's so many artifacts in there, and it has some good synergy. So I'm not. I don't do it in my equipment deck. But it's
You did it in
something worth
Glissa for a
considering.
while there as well.
I ran it in I moved it from Glissa over to Vela at one point.
Okay.
That's where I did it. But yeah, it's fun, and people's reaction when you start making Dark Steel Citadels is always good for a laugh. And like, what is happening?
Yeah,
Why do you
especially
have 5 Dark Steel Citadel tokens?
if you have nothing going on, and nothing to spend your mana on, might as well just start ramping stuff out.
Yeah. So in that's just the ramp portion. You can throw a sword on Prototype Portal and start making swords every turn for 3 mana. That's pretty decent too, having multiple copies of, Sword of X and Y.
They only have 2 hands. They can only carry 2 swords. That's it. That's how that works.
Is it? Okay, well, good to know. So since I'm talking Prototype Portal and artifacts, we can jump over and talk about artifacts here.
Okay.
There's 24 in the deck, and a lot of them are equipment, but not all of them. You're in Boros, so you need to ramp too. So you have Archaeomancer's Map as a way to go get lands if you're behind. Black Blade Reforged, a great way to just one-shot anybody who gets out of line. Boros Signet for ramp. Dowsing Dagger, also for ramp, and it buffs your creatures before it transforms. Embercleave, because Double Strike is a thing. Cauldra Complete, really nice piece of equipment that comes into play as a creature that you can also then equip up. Mana Crypt, Mask of Memory. Whenever a equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you may draw 2 cards, then discard 1 card, which is a great way to both draw and get card selection in Boros. Masterwork of Ingenuity, which I mentioned, 1 mana, and it comes into play as a copy of any equipment in the battlefield. Probably just going to be a second copy of any sword. Mox Opal for ramp. Shadow Spear as a nice piece of equipment. Soul Ring. Strixhaven Stadium as a win condition and a mana rock. Sword of Dungeons and Dragons.
Illegal.
But a pretty easy card to get people to allow you to use
Yes.
as a Rule Zero conversation one. Sword of Feast and Famine, that's the protection from black and green one, and draws you a card when you deal combat damage to a player and they discard a card.
Nope, other way around.
And you untap your lands.
They just discard. I don't think you draw.
They discard and you untap your lands.
Yep.
Yeah. Fire and Ice, which is the pro red and blue one, and this is the one that draws you a card,
Yes.
and it shocks something.
Yep.
Hearth and Home is the pro green and white one, and when it deals combat damage to a player, you blink a creature you control and tutor up a basic land. Sword of Light and Shadow is pro white and black. When it deals combat damage to a player, you gain 3 life and return up to 1 target creature from your graveyard to your hand. Sinew and Steel is the pro black and red. When it deals combat damage to a player, destroy up to 1 target planeswalker and up to 1 target artifact.
This needs to be prerequisited. It doesn't say that player that it dealt damage to.
Exactly. Yep. You just destroy those things.
Yep.
Sword of Truth and Justice is white and blue protection. When it deals damage to a player, you put a +1 counter on a creature you control, then you proliferate. Sword of War and Peace, protection from red and white. And when combat damage is dealt, it deals damage to that player equal to the number of cards in their hand, and you gain a life for each card in your hand. Sword of the Animist, this is not one of these sword cycle, but it's a sword that tutors up a land when a creature attacks. This is even based on combat damage.
Yep.
Talisman of Conviction for some ramp, and Umezawa's Jit, which is just a busted piece of equipment in other formats, and it's just a pretty decent one in ours.
Yeah. It's a baby sword.
It is. Half of a sword. So, artifacts, I mean, you can't go wrong with just equipping stuff with a bunch of swords. That's actually kind of the problem with all the swords, is they make it so it's tough to run anything else.
Yes.
They're just so much better than most other pieces of equipment.
Yeah, and all their abilities are just good. I know you're playing all of them, but there's a couple of them they're not very powerful that I don't like. War and Peace I'm not a fan of War and Peace. Usually not a fan of Light and Shadow neither, but you're playing a themed deck, so I can understand why you're playing them.
Yeah, I don't run Light and Shadow in my sword deck for the same reason. It just wasn't effective enough for me. But if you want to run all of them, I get it. That's fun.
Yes.
So the one piece of equipment I'm gonna strongly recommend here, particularly given the theme, and it's dirt cheap, and that's Inquisitor's Flail. It's 2 to cast, 2 to equip. From way back in the original Innistrad set, and it's like 35 cents. And this isn't just the app lying to me. I think I mentioned Dong Zhao in last week's show.
That was great.
Architect or whoever I was looking at told me it was, $40, and it's really like $300.
That's what it told me too. And when that came up in our Slack that someone mentioned that, I'm like, I better double check that, because I swear that's what it said to me too.
So Inquisitor's Flail is definitely dirt cheap. If a equipped creature would deal combat damage, it deals double that damage, and if a equipped creature would take combat damage, it takes twice as much. But you're just not going to, your creatures aren't taking combat damage because they have protection from whatever. You're just swinging at people that can't block. And it stacks with double strike. So like your double strike damage is being doubled, which is a nice thing about those double kind of effects. And there's a bunch of instants and sorceries that do the same thing in red, but I didn't recommend any of those because this deck is trying to stick with equipment versus spells. But if you want an equipment that doubles your doubling, Inquisitor's Flail is really, really good, and at 35 cents is well worth finding a slot for in this deck.
Agreed. No, it's a good one. There was a couple of them that I wanted to suggest too, but they're actually creatures is how they start off. So
yep,
I think we'll hold off till then.
The one I wasn't sure about is Strixhaven Stadium. I like Strixhaven Stadium a lot, but I feel like, I guess, so I'll read it right now for those that don't remember, because there are 1,000 cards come out every year. That's actually not right. 2,000 or 3,000 cards come out every year. It's a mana rock, so you can tap it for colorless, and it's 3 mana. And when you tap it, you put a point counter on it. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to you, you remove a point counter. And whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to an opponent, put a point counter on it. And then if it has 10 or more point counters on it, remove them all, and that player loses the game.
Yep.
So it does work with double strike, because whenever they take combat damage, so like for each strike, each creature will put 2 counters on it on the stadium. But there's still not that many creatures in this deck, and I just feel like with double strike and equipment, you're going to kill them from combat damage way before you will be able to kill somebody with the counters in a Strixhaven Stadium.
I can see that, yeah.
I mean, I've even, I run it in my Talran deck, and I've killed a person with it once, I think. But and I'm still running it in that deck because it is a go wide deck, and I want to try it more. But even in that deck where I'm swinging with 2/2 Drakes, I've almost found that I go so wide that I kill people just with the sheer amount of Drakes before I kill them with Strixhaven Stadium.
Makes sense.
So it's a cool card, don't get me wrong, and I've lost to it before as well. I just feel like maybe this deck isn't perfect for it. Now, I could be wrong, though I've never played it. Maybe it's way better than it looks from the outside in because of the double strike, so take that with a grain of salt.
I mean, I've always been torn on this card because me personally, I'd rather play... If I were to play at 3 mana, it'd be like Commander Sphere because I want to sack it to draw a card.
Sure.
That's where I always look at it, is I want something that's got double utility instead of trying to, sack it to win the game type of thing. I'd rather just, draw the card overall.
Sure.
But I mean, I could see it working, and maybe it's just one of those cards where he wants to jam in here so he can rub it in his buddies' faces and be like, I just stadiumed you out of the game.
For sure. The last goofy one is Arcane Signet is just better than Talisman of Conviction or whatever. But I mean, who cares? They don't have one handy or whatever. It's just a strictly better version of that. But I noticed the other day in my Glissa deck, I don't have an Arcane Signet, and I do have the Talisman in there, so I'm doing the same thing in the deck just because I never got around to putting an Arcane Signet into it. So, I mean, I'm doing the same thing. I need to fix that in my deck at some point too. But
yeah, I know at one time Arcane Signets were really hard to find. So
they were expensive too. Yeah, they're hard to find and expensive. They were almost the entire cost of those early Brawl decks for sure.
Yeah.
So that's one. I mean, just thought I would throw it out there, but not a big deal.
Yeah, I'd almost run just both of them if I had a choice.
Yeah, probably too.
I mean, I'd probably run the Arcane Signet over the Borrow Signet and leave in the Talisman just because then you don't have to tap to create mana off the Signet. You're just getting straight up mana whether you tap the other two.
All right, Chris, you want to talk about the sorceries we have here in this deck?
Sorceries. Sure. Oh, there they are. Wow. Okay, I found them. They were hiding on me. All right. We have 7 sorceries. We have a Jessica's Will, Open the Armory, Savine's Reclamation, Vandalblast, Wake the Past, Waves of Aggression, and Wheel of Misfortune. So I actually like all of these. I've never actually seen Wheel of Misfortune played in a deck. I've seen a lot of people talk about it, but never actually played. So I'm curious how that actually plays out for people.
I've ran into it once or twice, and it was fine. It didn't it wasn't amazing, but it got the person who cast it got kind of the result they wanted. It was okay. It was fine.
Yep. The other one is Wake the Past. It's a lot of mana for it when you could be playing. What's the 5 mana one? I can't even think of it. It's mono red now. That returns the artifacts.
Trash to Treasure,
something like that. Now, granted, this gives haste.
Yeah.
For an extra 2 mana. I don't know if that's worth it or not.
There's not that many artifact creatures in here.
Yes.
That you care about, really.
So I don't know. Maybe I would take a look. It could be a horse apiece either way. Unless you want to bring back your, I think it's Burnished Heart is the one creature that was an artifact that really could matter with the haste. So that was one that I saw. But then again, I don't know.
Yeah, that was one that seemed a little like it wasn't that I was on the fence about as well. Particularly because of the 7 mana CMC.
Yes.
I don't think it's bad at all, but like I just felt like, how often do you have to bring back 9 artifacts or something? Maybe often. I don't know. I haven't played the deck, so
Yeah, when I look at Boros, I try to get it low. Like, I don't like having lots of high drops like that, or even like I don't like having 1 or 2 of them in it, just because Boros is hard to get up that high in mana because you have so much else going on.
Yeah. Jessica's Will's great. I like actually Sven's Reclamation's really good here too, because it's capped to permanents 3 or less, but like almost every sword is basically the only thing for your permanents, or a couple of the creatures like Sun Titan, Balin Wandering Knight doesn't, but like among the artifacts, basically aside from Cauldra and the Embercleave, everything else comes back with Sven's Reclamation. I run it in my Azorius equipment deck too, and it's great there, and it looks like it would be equally good here as well.
And it has flashback, and I love flashback.
Yep. And I will mention too, Waves of Aggression is the one extra combat step card in here. Untap all creatures that attack this turn, and after this main phase, there's an additional combat phase.
Yep.
Followed by additional main phase. I would assume the reason that one is chosen is because it has Retrace. So essentially, you can play this card from your graveyard by discarding a land every turn, basically, or at least multiple times a turn you could if you had enough mana in one turn.
Yeah, you sure could. I mean, I don't see why you wouldn't be able to.
So yeah, that's one I actually, if you have to go with one extra combat step, I really like Waves of Aggression just because of the ability to just keep reusing it.
Yep. I also understand, like he was talking about some of the people he plays with, they play graveyard style decks, so they're obviously not playing Graveyard Hate. So you're going to get this Retrace to go off a couple times.
Yeah, yep. And well, since there weren't a ton of sorceries, Chris, you want to quick go over the enchantments as well?
Enchantments. Yes, this one's going to be super hard to do, so bear with me. There are 3 enchantments. We have a Fighter class, a Sigarda's Aid, and a Smothering Tithe. What do we talk about out of these 3? I guess Fighter's class, because it's like the only one that is, odd, I guess.
Yeah, Sigarda's Aid, everyone knows, is a, free equip stuff. Smothering Tithe is just busted.
Yeah, so Fighter's class is a saga, I guess, or whatever these were.
They were class enchantments, I guess, that look kind of like sagas.
Yeah, so for Chapter 1 or Level 1, when it first comes into play, it reads, search your library for any equipment card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle. So that's for a red and a white. You just cast this and you get that. I mean, really good tutor. It's a permanent, so, you get to up it to the next level, which, can happen. And I do believe it's anytime. I think you can do it at sorcery it says at sorcery speed. So it has to be during your turn to do this. So then to go to level 2, it costs 3 mana, color generic and red-white. So equip abilities you activate cost 2 less to activate. So let's backtrack, everyone who's paying attention. And we go, oh my goodness, Sword of X and Y costs what? 2 to equip? No way. So that's just free equip right there.
Yep.
And then the last one, it costs 3 generic and red-white for level 3. And whenever a creature you control attacks, up to 1 target creature blocks it this combat if able. So, I mean, it's if you got a guy who's all suited up or whatever, and you just like, this guy has to block so I can just kill it. Or if he has double strike or something like that, so...
Yeah, the perfect deck for that card. It's a nice way to have a backup plan for free equips too. So
yes, and for those of you that don't know, they do retain all of their abilities. Like if you go to level 3, you still have level 2 and level 1's abilities still.
Yes. I really couldn't think of much specifically here to change to it. I mean, like there's always good utility enchantments that you can add that are good, but like it's an artifact deck. Most of your power is going to be in artifacts. I get why the only ones you're running here are ones that enable your artifact or equipment shenanigans. So
the one that I would put in here, and he actually has it in the sideboard, and that is Duelist's Heritage. Just the ability to just give double strike on whim, during combat off an enchantment is huge. And a lot of people don't play a lot of removal for enchantments and artifacts. So, I mean, it's mainly artifact removal more than anything. And so that enchantment could stick around all game for all you know. And then you can... I've seen Max do this a bazillion times to people, go into combat and be like, oh, I'm going to give that guy double strike. And then they're like, uh-oh.
Right, yeah, right. The ability to do it to other people's creatures is huge.
Yes.
Yeah. That was one of those cards that I remember when it came out. I was like, why is everyone not more into this card? That card's amazing. Okay, so we've got pen instants here. There's a Chroma's Will, it's just basically a win condition and a way to protect your stuff if you need to. Boral's Charm, again, basically a way to protect your stuff, making your stuff indestructible. But it
gives double strike.
Also gives double strike, and it also deals 4 damage to a player or a planeswalker, which I've seen matter before. Deflecting Swat, way to save your stuff. Dispatch, for those who don't know, it's a 1 mana instant, single white, tap target creature, but if you control 3 or more artifacts, you exile the creature instead. So it becomes a better Swords to Plowshares or Path to Exile if you have 3 or more artifacts. Enlightened Tutor, just a tutor to go get stuff. Flawless Maneuver can be free if you control your commander, and it just gives your creatures indestructible till end of turn. Way to protect your stuff. Generous Gift, amazing piece of removal. Heliod's Intervention, double white and an X for an instant, and you choose one of the 2 following modes. You can destroy X target artifacts or enchantments, or target player gains twice X life. I run it in actually my equipment deck as well, and I've used the life gain portion at least one time to save myself. And the ability to spend like 6 or 7 mana later on in the game to destroy a bunch of stuff is pretty useful too.
Yep.
Swords to Plowshares is here as well, and Teferi's Protection to save your stuff. Can't totally get why that card's here. It's probably in every white deck if you can afford it, so amazing card.
I was looking and I don't remember seeing this one. The 1 mana tutor that tutors up an equipment, I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. I thought I saw it in the maybe board earlier, but I don't see it anymore.
Oh, yeah. I forget what it's called, too. I know what you mean.
It's got a picture of an anvil.
Yeah. Steel Shaper's Gift?
Yes, Steel Shaper's Gift. Go. Is that in here?
It's in the sideboard, but that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. That would be one. Oh, it's a sorcery. For some reason, I'm thinking it was an instant like Enlightened Tutor, but that would definitely be one that I would definitely consider because getting any of your artifacts into play, faster is better. Like, I mean, going for a Sword of Hearth and Home or Sword of the Animus to start ramping lands out is just huge if you get that right away.
Yeah, I mean, that's always helpful to be able to just get that equipment more consistently.
Yep.
I described Dispatch. The one thing I like Dispatch a lot, and in this deck, it's probably going to be turned on pretty often. I still don't think I would run it over Path to Exile. I run it I run it in my equipment deck, but I don't run it instead of Path. I run Swords and Path and Dispatch. I feel like, particularly in Commander, obviously you don't love giving someone a land, but like for the most part, by the time it matters, like you need to remove something, and you have your affinity for artifacts or Metalcraft, I guess in this case, you can probably afford to give them a land. It's not going to hurt you necessarily, particularly a basic. And there are just going to be those occasions where someone like Board Wipes or Vandal Blasts or you just have only hit 2 artifacts and you want to use it and can't. I would rather know that every single time, 100% consistently, I'm going to be able to use my removal spell than occasionally have times when it doesn't work.
Yes.
And I don't think it's a big deal necessarily. I think I mentioned Inquisitor's Flail over under artifacts. I think that card is really huge and would be really useful in this deck. I think it's a good add and I would find room for it. I don't think this one's a big deal, but like for me personally, I prefer the consistency and knowing my card's always going to work. I love Dispatch in an equipment deck or an artifact deck, but I wouldn't run it over Path. I'd run it alongside Path. That's me.
I can get behind that.
One more I'll throw out there. I run also in my artifact deck Patrician Scorn. It's an old card from back in the Time Spiral block. Instant speed for 3 and a white. And it says, if you played another white spell this turn, you can play without paying its mana cost. And it says, destroy all enchantments.
Yep.
I mean, occasionally you're going to hit your Sigarda's Aid or your Fighter Class, your Smothering Tithe, but like you only have 3 enchantments in this deck. Most of the time, it's just going to be, because you have a ton of white spells in this deck, most of the time it's just going to be 0 mana to destroy everyone's enchantments and don't do anything to you.
Yep.
And at that cost, too, what I've found is there's been times when there's like 1 enchantment or 2 enchantments in play. I don't care. It's free. I Swords to Plowshare someone's scary thing, and I'm like, I might as well for no mana also destroy their enchantments.
Yeah.
So I've liked that card a lot in my equipment deck. I don't think this deck needs it, but like I would throw it out there. It's a great piece of value, and then also everyone's like, what is that stupid card that I had no idea existed? So that's always fun too. So that's one I would just at least throw out there to consider.
Yeah, I have looked at that card quite a few times too. I play in too many enchantments in all my decks, and I'm like, no, I can't do it.
I have it in one deck because there's so many equipment, and I have at one point I got down to like I had 2 enchantments, which was Sigarda's Aid and Smothering Tithe.
Yep.
I'm like, well, at this point I might as well just have no enchantments and I'll run Patrician Scorn, and then hey, I've got a free slot. It's like because I pulled my other 2 enchantments. So yeah, that's the only place I run it to because I have so many enchantments in most of my decks.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing a Chaos Warp in here as well.
Yeah, I like Chaos Warp a lot.
I like Chaos Warp in decks like this, not as a removal spell, but as a protection spell. So when something, like if yours gets targeted off, you can just Chaos Warp it back into your deck to flip a random card. So then this card that's targeting you becomes moot and void, and you get a free card out of it.
And you also, there's plenty of times when like, I just need that thing gone. I don't care what you flip over.
Yep.
It's going to be better than the thing that you've got out there right now that's going to destroy everything. So
yeah, because I look at it in the same aspect as like Generous Gift. If you're using it as a removal, it hits pretty much anything, but you're giving your opponent something of value in return.
Yeah.
So,
all right, last but not least, Chris, you want to tell us what they have for creatures here?
There are 20 creatures. We have Akiru Linesinger, Arden, Intrepid Archaeologist, Armored Sky Hunter, Aurelia the War Leader, Balin Wandering Knight, Bronze Guardian, Bruised Tarl Boorish Herder. I get a kick out of that name. He's so boorish. Burnished Heart, Danitha Compassion Paragon, Esper Sentinel, Halvar God of Battle. Halvar also is one of the MDFC cards where it flips into Sword of the Realm, which is a legendary equipment that gives, +2/+0 in vigilance, and when the creature dies, return it to its owner's hand. Then we have Hellkite Igniter, Imperial Recruiter, Port Razor. I love this card. I just can't find a deck for it personally. Pure Steel Paladin, Recruiter of the Guard, Solemn Simulacrum, Saram Senior Edificer, Stoneforge Mystic, and a good old Sun Titan.
So kind of exactly what you would expect to see in a double strike equipment deck. There's like nothing that stands out as a bad card here, and there's a lot of things that totally make sense.
There's one card I don't like, and I understand why it's in here because it's probably really powerful, and that's a Hellkite Igniter, Flying Haste, 7 mana, 5/5, 1 in a red. It gets +X/+0 until end turn where X is the number of artifacts you control. The only reason that I am down on this card is because of the 7 mana cost.
Yes.
If it wasn't so high, then it wouldn't be such a big deal. But and
you're also a deck where he said that he tries to avoid one-shotting people.
Yeah.
All Hellkite Igniter does is one-shot people.
Yep. Like I would rather play like Brunner Battlehammer, just because then it gives me free equip if I have to restart,
Sure.
rebuilding. Another card that I was thinking of, and I was very surprised not to see it in this deck. So it makes me, kind of believe that maybe board wipes and other stuff is not so big in this deck, but there's no Nahiri, I think it's Nahiri Lithomancer, the white one, that spits out 2 1/1s, then you automatically equip. So you can rebuild with that card. So I don't know if that's something maybe to think about. It's at 5 mana, so it's less than what the 7 mana is off of Hellkite Igniter. Gives you 2 1/1s that you can equip to, which helps you with your go wide strategy. And you can also emblem it to get another sword. So it seems like it fits all the criteria of what you're looking for, but I could be wrong with that too.
The couple of creatures that jumped out at me that I would consider adding, because number one, this first one I mentioned is part of the Graveyard Hate one that he asked for. It was Lion Sash.
Yes.
It's an equipment cat 1/1 for 1 and white. And you could spend a white to exile target card from a graveyard, and if that card was a permanent card, you put a +1 counter on the Lion Sash. And then you can also turn it into equipment, so you can equip it to something for 2 mana, and the equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each +1 counter on Lion Sash. So like it just has a gazillion uses. It's useful in this deck that cares about equipment. It's a creature that if you want, you can put swords on it itself, and it has +1 counters, and you can deal with someone's graveyard. I've gotten it out twice so far in my equipment deck, and both times it's done really, really good work. So it's a card I would consider because it just fills a lot of the voids you ask for in this deck.
Yeah, and if you're into aesthetics and like how cards look, the full art version of it or the extended art is beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really good looking card.
Yep. The other one that I was thinking of along those lines was the Lizard Blades, which is a 1/1 has double strike, which you can reconfigure or equip to a creature to give them double strike. Just another way of giving double strike, but it's also a creature, so you could suit it up with swords, so it automatically has double strike. So I mean, it's just it is what it is.
It's not like a fire shrieker where
Yes.
like if you already have double strike, it does you no good. At least the lizard blades are a creature that you can equip.
Yep.
Nettle Cyst.
I forgot about that one.
Artifact you control, and same thing. It comes into play on a germ. It's a living weapon. So like when it ETBs, you can suit it up, and if a board wipe happens and it kills that creature, then it becomes it's an equipment that you can put on something else, and just is, again, maybe it's too much of a one shot beast. But in this kind of deck, Nettle Cyst seems like the kind of thing I would want. I again, because it's a living weapon, I put it under creatures, but it probably is one I would consider. In the last one I had here, and there's a couple different creatures that do the same thing, but if you only wanted to run one, Indomitable Archangel, 2 white for a creature, and it has Metalcraft. So it's a flying 4/4 for 4 mana, but has Metalcraft. Artifacts you control have Shroud as long as you control 3 or more artifacts. So I guess occasionally it'll get in the way of you equipping up like your Esper Sentinel or your Burnished Heart, I guess. But
I don't think you're equipping Burnished Heart, man. I don't think that's
not
happening.
Very often, yeah. But at that point, you're going to equip the Indomitable Archangel probably because it's got Flying Innovation. It's a 4/4. But the ability to protect your stuff from anyone removing it, I have at least found in my deck, in my equipment deck, is really, really useful. I have the Archangel. I have Leon and Abunis in that deck, which gives your artifacts hexproof, which is probably safer than the Archangel. But I found the Archangel being a 4/4 and having flying is to be really, really useful. So I like that slightly more. But I have both of those. I also have, there's one more that gives my artifacts hexproof, Padim, Console of Innovation, which is blue, so you can't run it here. But I have 3 things that give my artifacts hexproof or Shroud just to protect stuff. And I have Fountain Watch, which is one that gives artifacts and enchantments Shroud as well in my sideboard that I've considered to add a 4th one to my deck. So at least for me, keeping people from being able to target my equipment is really useful. I would think it might be here as well. So that's one I would at least consider. If you only had room for one, I think that's probably the most useful one as an attacker, at least.
Yes, I agree.
That's all I really have. I mean, this deck is pretty tightly tuned. I like almost everything in it. If I was going to down tune it, if you were looking to like make things maybe a little bit less threatening, the easy things you could do would be to pull out a few of the tutors, pull out, under creatures, you could pull out Imperial Recruiter and Recruiter the Guard and swap those out for a couple of the creatures or things we talked about. Just because not only are tutors powerful, they feel powerful to people. So like once you start dropping a couple of tutors, that tends to make people much more wary of what you're about to do than just dropping something that's strong sometimes. Yes,
especially in a deck like this where it's very narrow-minded on what it's doing. So it's going to be a lot of times like the same time you're going to tutor for the same thing repeatedly. I noticed like in my Alesha deck, I play both of the recruiters, but I don't ever go for the same thing. Like it's each game, it's always different, but that's because I play a bazillion, 2 power, 2 toughness guys. So it's like, okay, what do I need at this moment to change the game state for me? Whereas in this deck, you're like, oh, I'm going to go straight for, an Esper Sentinel, or I'm going to go straight for Pure Steel Paladin or something like that to start setting that kind of stuff up.
Exactly. So anyway, thank you, Brian, for sharing your deck with us. Actually, that was quite cool. It was interesting to look because I've been so used to lately looking at my Azorius equipment deck that I kind of had forgotten about some of the new tools, things like Fighter Class or things like Axguard Armory that Boros had gotten, because I've just been mostly paying attention to blue and white versus ignoring red. So
yep.
Very cool deck. I like it, and I hope you continue to enjoy playing in the spell table with Commander Central people. Very cool to hear.
I don't think he enjoys playing in it from the sounds of what he's saying.
F those guys. Exactly. All right, y'all. That will wrap up episode 318 of Commander Central. I am Dana. You can find me on Twitter at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDRCentral_Max. You can also find him getting a sunburn sitting next to the pool. And you can find Chris at Twitter at WiseSquishy1. Our show is produced by Rafael Garcia. You can find him on the Twitter birds at Ursa Bearwalker. And our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. We'll be back next week with a new show. Until then, I'm Dana.
And I'm Chris.